Michael Kilbon, and this is the Michael Kilbon Television Show. Our guest today is Henry Roa, who was an Army veteran from the Korean War. Hello, Henry.
Hello, Mike.
First off, where were you born?
I was born in Joliet, Illinois. I was born in a boxcar provided by the EJ&E Railroad. My mother told me many times that we were born in boxcars, but I just, we were kids and I just didn't think much of it until I got older now, and I decided to go look in the internet, look for the U.S. Census. And in 1930, I found the census, and sure enough, I found a page where at the top of the page, up to about line 80, showed Woodward Avenue.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure exactly where they were at.
Right there by the fence, right along there. My
Yeah,
mom knows
Were they lined up this way or along that way? No,
I don't
They
remember.
were this way.
this way.
They were this way.
1917, the United States had an immigration policy that wanted to keep out the Irish, the Polish, mostly the Italians, and the Mexicans. But since the men from the United States were leaving to fight in World War I, the United States had a shortage of labor, and the women weren't in the workforce like they are today. So what the U.S. did is they allowed the Mexicans to come in and forgot about that policy of 1917. They needed these workers in the farms, the factories, and the railroads. So my grandparents came in, and all they had to do was pay 5 centavos to take a shower, and they were welcomed into the United States. No paperwork, nothing. They were allowed to come in, do what they had to do in the fields. Migrant workers, they worked their way up towards Joliet, Illinois, where they had railroads, steel mills, and factories. And those that worked for the railroad, the EJ&E Railroad, they were provided free housing in railroad boxcars that were provided on also some homes, empty homes that were provided for the workers. Some of these homes didn't even have windows. They had to put cardboard up, the curtains to keep in the wintertime to keep warm. And that's where I was born, in a boxcar in Joliet, Illinois, 1933.
So where did you grow up?
Well, my first 8 years, naturally I was in Joliet. From the boxcars, like I said, my siblings were there. The last one was around 1937, 38, I don't recall. Like I said, I have no memories. Until we moved on to Hacker Avenue, we lived for about 3 years. And that's when I started to remember things. Growing up on Hacker Avenue, I remember watching our neighbors slaughter hogs that were hung from a tree. They used to, the neighbors would get together with the hogs, chickens that they were growing, slaughter them, and each one would take their portion food. Other things I remember, because it was traumatic for me, was back then, funerals were held in the homes. A lot of funerals, because they couldn't all afford to have funeral services in the funeral home. And I remember my youngest brother, Arthur, they were carrying him down these stairs on Hacker Avenue in this small coffin, casket. And like I say, I remember that because they were traumatic things. I grew up there, and then my mother moved to Chicago, and the first memory I have of Chicago is when we lived on Wentworth Avenue, about 47th and Wentworth. Those homes are all gone. They're replaced by the Dan Ryan Expressway. School, the first day of school when my mother brought me here, because we just lived down on Hacker Avenue, a couple of blocks away, and I remember my first day, I was crying and crying. I didn't want to go to school. My mother was looking out the little window into the room, rather, and we were all sitting, the students were sitting on the floor, and I was crying, and this little beautiful girl, blonde, I think she had blue eyes, she put her arm around me and she comforted me and told me, don't cry, you know. That's all I remember. Her name was Beatrice Lerner. That's all I remember, the first day. High school years up until 1953, where I then started to work with Western Electric Company, but I only worked about a half a year when I was called into the military.
All right. And how did you grow up?
We thought we were happy. We didn't think we were poor. Like I said, when we were growing up in Joliet, out of those boxcars, then we moved to Hacker. Oh, and then we moved to Parks Avenue. I forgot about that. And I went to Park School. And because our relatives worked for the railroad, we lived in a ground dirt basement with a big pot belly stove, coal burning stove. And in order to get the coal for that stove, we used to go to railroad tracks that were just a few hundred yards down on Parks. And we used to pick up the coal from these train firemen, because they were friends. They would come by very slow and throw the coal along the tracks, and we would pick it up and take it home for the stove. And this is how I grew up. But it was just, we didn't consider ourselves poor. This was during the Depression, and this is the way we lived.
Now, why did you choose to get into the Army?
Okay, like I said, after I graduated high school, I had to register, and I asked the recruiting sergeant, if I'm drafted, will I be able to choose where to serve? And he told me no, I had to serve wherever they put me. And I said, well, I work for Western Electric. My experience is telephony. And he says, well, if you enlist for 3 years, we'll send you to Camp Gordon, Georgia, and you can serve in a Signal Corps school down in Camp Gordon, Georgia. So I did, and I went to Camp Gordon, Georgia after training, basic training. I was put into the school, and I served as cadre and as an instructor, training the men that would go to Korea to lay lines along the front lines and other necessities required, for communications.
Right. How long were you in the Army when you and Juanita got married?
I knew my wife since birth, but we can go into that later. When I was in Camp Gordon, Georgia, I had came back on furlough, and I asked my wife, Juanita. I took her to a New Year's party, a dance, and I told her, let's get married. As long as I'm going to serve and I'm going to be sent to Okinawa or Korea, let's get married now and let's save our money. And that's what we did. We got married on March 13th of 1954, after I was in the service for 1 year.
So you and Juanita have been married for 70 years now.
Well, she passed away 9 years ago. We were actually married for 61 years. 61 years. And I miss her very much.
Yes, my condolences for the loss of your wife, but congratulations that you and Juanita stayed married 61 years. That's pretty much of a rarity nowadays. Henry, after you married, you went to Okinawa. Would you care to tell any more about that?
Yes, in Okinawa, like I said, at first I was scheduled to go to Korea, but like I said, the Korean truce, they didn't require any men there anymore. So they sent me to Okinawa instead to help the Okinawans replace an obsolete telephone system. They had this old manual system with telephone operators, and they needed a new system. So I had a crew of Japanese workers, and we helped them set up new telephone offices, electronic switching systems. It was all done electronically, no more telephone operators. And I really got to know a lot of Japanese friends. I had a driver, because these Japanese people, they loved having us there because of the jobs that we were able to provide for them. My driver was earning 11 cents an hour, and to them that was back then like $100 a week. And he was so happy, and other workers were earning that much too. But then I trained him to be a telephone repairman and installer to help with this installation. And one of the workers in our warehouse, Japanese man, he says, Sergeant Low, because they couldn't pronounce the R. They couldn't say Sergeant Roa. They said, Sergeant Low, Arasaki, he's your driver, but he's also working as a telephone man. Don't you think he ought to get more money? And I said, you're right. So I went to my sergeant. I told him, my driver Arasaki should be getting paid also for being a telephone repairman installer, not just my driver. So he got a pay increase for my driver as a driver telephone man, and instead of 11 cents an hour, he was now earning 16 cents an hour. Boy, was he happy. He was getting paid for two jobs. And I really got to know Japanese friends, and I forgot all their names. I can tell you a story later on when I left, but we can get into that when we get into my life after I got back.
All right. And as far as working for 16 cents an hour, it must have been prestigious work, or important work, if you will. And yes, that'd be, nowadays, how much? About $16 an hour, somewhere around there?
Oh, today I would say at least $25 an hour, yes.
I see. Yeah, Henry, one last question. I'll pretty much leave it up to you. Anything you'd like to tell our listening audience about, any veteran organizations you're involved in, or anything else? Okay,
after I came back from Okinawa, we lived on Halsted Street in Canaryville in Chicago for a couple of years, and we finally, after our first two children, we needed a bigger place to live, so we bought a home in Brighton Park, and I've been there ever since. That was in 1958, and I've been there ever since. But we got involved in civic, church organizations. We worked a lot with Archdiocese of Chicago, and then later on I decided to join the American Legion and other clubs. And it's this American Legion club that really got me involved with many things. I joined the American Legion Central Park Post 1028, and I became so much involved with them. I became an officer, a member of the ritual team, and what we do is what I've been doing with the post is I've been trying to record a history of the post, and I also did Poppy Days in May for the post. But getting back to the organization they made me the historian, and I've been putting together stories, trying to put together stories of the veterans. And one of the stories I wanted to put together was a 101-year-old veteran, Tony Hernandez. Hopefully we can interview him when he comes back from Michigan. He's in Michigan right now. And one of the things that I help organize with the Post is this Veterans Breakfast that we have every year in Brighton Park, McKinley Park Field House. It's sponsored by Alma Anaya, Cook County Commissioner. And prior to her, it was sponsored by Chuy Garcia. He was the commissioner, and then he became the 4th District representative in Washington. So she was elected the commissioner, and she has continued this breakfast. It started out with about a dozen veterans. It grew to 20. Last year, it was over 40, and I think that this year we're going to be over 45, maybe 50. The other thing that I get involved with the Post is the commemoration of World War II. At first, it was known as the Pearl Harbor commemoration. And I attended the first few commemorations up north. It was done at American Legion Franklin Delano Roosevelt Post. They were remembering the casualties of Pearl Harbor. But we had the Japanese consul representative there. We had the Philippine people there. And I felt kind of uneasy. We were remembering what they did to us at Pearl Harbor. I said, if this is a reconciliation, what I did the second and last year is, since I recite the closing prayer, I included not just let us remember the casualties of Pearl Harbor, let us remember the casualties of the Philippines, which happened the next day, and the casualties of the rest of the Pacific conflicts, like Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and all the other Pacific lands, because they suffered, altogether, they suffered more than what was the casualties of Pearl Harbor. And now the theme has been changed. Instead of remembering Pearl Harbor, we're remembering the casualties of World War II. That's what I am doing now.
Would you like to tell us more about any of your other activities?
Well, like you want to hear my last year in Okinawa, what I'm doing with the Post, or my dance company, which I'm very involved with now.
Well, you can tell us about your time in Okinawa, about the country itself, about the Post, about your dance company. I mean, this is up to you, Henry, so go ahead and go for it.
Okay, let me go back to Okinawa when I said I was going to say something about that. Like I said earlier, I really made a lot of friends in Okinawa. And when I left, the day I left, this truck comes up. My truck where my crew worked from. They drive up, and all of these guys were on the truck. They jumped off. They just went to the pier at the end because it wasn't that far, and they all started saying, "Goodbye, Silent Low. Goodbye, Silent Low." Like I said, they couldn't pronounce the R's. And I started waving back, shouting back, "Goodbye, guys. So long, so long." And I would say, "Goodbye, Taro. Goodbye, Skosh. Arasaki." I couldn't remember all the other names. That was really a heartwarming experience for me. It really brought tears to my eyes because, like I say, I learned a lot about the Japanese people, how good they are, and the many good friends that we had. In fact, after I left, when I bought my home in Brighton Park, I got a phone call, and it was the man said, "Hello, this is Skosh. Skosh." I said, "Skosh." Skosh means shorty, a little bit. Skosh. I said, "Skosh, where are you? Are you calling from Okinawa, long distance?" And he says, "No, Hello, I'm in the United States." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania." And he explained that he joined the shipping company in Okinawa because he wanted to come to the United States someday to see me. And he came, but he was disappointed that they only came as far as Erie. He thought he was going to come to Chicago, Navy Pier, but he found out they weren't coming this far, and he called me. And, we just talked for half an hour. I reversed the charges because the operator cut in and says, "You got to put in more money." And we talked for almost an hour, probably, talking about old times in Okinawa. It was really an experience. Now, as far as my activities with the Post, when I came back, my wife and I got more involved with civic organizations, our church, and I really didn't get involved into the dance company that you asked me about until my youngest daughter, Nicole, was born. When my first three children were teenagers, Nicole was born, and that is when I decided to look into my heritage, where I came from. And I looked and I found two dance companies, and I became involved with them. They became known as the Mexican Folkloric Dance Company of Chicago. That was back in 1980s, and the company was incorporated. I incorporated them in 1982, and we've become so famous. We're internationally known. We went to Ireland twice, Mexico. We had a tour. And I got my daughter involved. And then later on, I decided, it was my brother-in-law that encouraged me to join the Post. So I finally joined because, I was so busy. I said, other things to do, my gosh. But I had dropped out of some of the other groups that my wife and I belonged to. And so I decided finally to join the Post because of my brother-in-law. And I became so involved with the Post that I became a member of the Rifle Ritual Team, the Honor Guard. I became an officer. And finally they made me the historian because they had seen my video of that was made of my wife and I as keepers of culture, because we got involved with the dance company and other groups, and they made me the historian to write a history of our members, and that's what I have been doing, trying to write history, and I want to post them in the newspaper, like thank you for your service articles every other week, every month. And I'm also involved with the commemoration, Korean commemoration, every July, around the 24th of July in Kennedy Park. The first Korean commemoration stone in the United States is a World War II commemoration up north at American Legion, Franklin Delano Roosevelt Post. I originally got involved because I was asked to do a closing prayer. And the first year I read the prayer, remember the casualties of Pearl Harbor. But then the subsequent years, I'm sitting next to a Japanese consul representative. The other representatives from different countries. And here we are remembering the casualties, the things that happened to the men in Pearl Harbor. And I'm sitting next to this. It's supposed to be reconciliation. So what I did in my closing prayer, instead of just remembering the Pearl Harbor casualties, I said, let us remember the Pearl Harbor casualties, the casualties in the other islands of the Pacific that were also, because, like for instance, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they suffered 100 times more than what we lost at Pearl Harbor. Let us also remember everyone, also the Philippines, because they were also involved the following day of Pearl Harbor. And since then, they have decided to change the theme. Instead of remembering Pearl Harbor, it's going to be remember World War II. And we're going to still remember Pearl Harbor, but we're going to also remember all of the other nations that lost men in the World War II. So that it'll be changed. Instead of Pearl Harbor commemoration, it'll be World War II commemoration. And I'm sort of proud that I did this, former enemies, we're now allies, let's not say you did this to us back then, and that's what I've been doing.
All right.
Oh, you wanted to talk to me about my dance company?
Oh yes. Go ahead. Talk about your dance
Oh,
company.
yes. My dance company, like I said, I got involved because of my third daughter, my youngest daughter, coming along, and I wanted to learn. She inspired me to learn about my heritage, and I became the executive director of the dance company. And like I said, I told them, because at the beginning, they were doing it pro bono. They were not charging any money. And I said, when I incorporated them, I said, look, you cannot go on performing for nothing. You want to grow. You want to show the country, the world, the rest of Mexican music and dance. Because most of the world, all they know is the mariachi music, the Mexican hat dance. But there are over 300 dance styles, 300 music styles, including the rituals, indigenous. And that is what the company does. And I told them, if you want all these costumes to represent these different areas of Mexican history, you're going to have to start charging. And that's what I did. I stopped them from charging. One of the dancers said, well, who's going to hire us, if we're charging? I said, well, you'll get hired. Instead of performing 50 times a year, we're now only doing 25 times a year, but they're bigger performances. Like I said, we went to Ireland twice. They chose us to go to Ireland over groups from Mexico because of our repertoire that I mentioned. We do all of the dances from the 32 states, not just one state like that were going to overseas to Ireland, they would only dance in the costume of the state, the city that they were coming from. We presented 6, 7 different regions of Mexico with different costuming. That's why we were called back the second time. But that festival does not exist anymore. Hopefully, when they start it again, they'll call us back. But presently, we have toured the United States. We have performed with several Mexican megastars like Juan Gabriel, Pepe Aguilar. They're like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin were, the big stars. And how we have grown in recognition. And I'm kind of proud of that.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that there's so many dance styles and types of music. I was unaware of it, but we thank you for that bit of information, and it's been quite an interesting time talking with you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Michael Kilbon Television Show. Our guest has been Korean War veteran Henry Roa. Henry, thanks for your time and your service.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.